So my name is Solange de Souza, and I'm from the Office of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Legal Affairs. And we're here to present our Trinidad and Tobago National Country Report, State of our Country's Legislative Framework. All right. So, yes, feel free to focus on our graphics. We shine well. All right, so our current status. I'll get you all settled. I know I'm the one in between lunch now. So we'll go through these in more detail. We have our political directorate. We'll speak of Vision 2030. We'll speak of our policy for creation of Ministry of Digital Transformation. We'll speak to our current legislation. And of course, we'll talk about that estimation of 90% of our government being people-based. So we go straight into it. Our political directorate, captured under our policy document of Vision 2030, is that pillar on digitization. And in theme 4, we have the building of our global competitive businesses. And under that is our goal, where a business environment, we want to make it conducive to entrepreneurship, investment, and trade. Continuing on our political directorate is a collaboration that happened in 2019, where our Honorable the Honorable Keith Christopher Rowley, who's our Prime Minister, met with Her Excellency, the President of Estonia, and I do not want to try to call that name. I don't want to mess it up. However, they had very integral conversations with regards to making Trinidad and Tobago a digital first nation. Following in 2019 was also a step towards creating our e-cabinet. So I don't know how many countries as yet have it, but Trinidad was quite happy to see that our cabinet ministers could have their cabinet notes and minutes electronically saved and forwarded to them in a very secure environment. Of course, this move significantly reduced the paper dependency of our cabinet and therefore deepened the use of ICT within the government. And we can't do a presentation without talking about COVID now, yeah? So within the times of COVID, we would have seen where our Prime Minister, again, found a very poised position of creating our digital transformation and the roadmap towards recovery, thereby underscoring the need for the actualization of digital-first government. So as we go forward, we speak about our Ministry of Digital Transformation. A mandate was set. And then we moved into the preparation of our national digital strategy. Again, remember, we're still on current status, so all these things have happened and is actually continuing to occur. In 2021, we'll just drop down there a little bit, the National Digital Inclusion Survey was done by our Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, of which we have representatives here today, TACT. And also the UNDP came in and did a digital readiness assessment report. And I will go a little deeper into that when we speak towards the recommendations. All right, so the big question of legislation. So all these pieces of legislation upon the screen, they're just really a very small amount compared to the gambit of legislation that we're looking at, either to change via miscellaneous provisions or via standalone legislation. However, most of these that are highlighted here are the ones that touch and concern each other with regards to digitization and digitalization. Together with these, however, would also be our trade agreements. And our trade agreements are done specifically under the Solicitor General's Department of the Attorney General's Office. so that SG and deputy SGs, when you start to speak towards those, we may have to take some of those questions home. I'm just prompting them, for what may come. I'm not too sure. But yes, that is a very specific department with trained attorneys that deal specific to our trade agreements together with our Ministry of Trade. Remember, I'm from the Ministry of the Attorney General. Yes? So I just want to touch a little bit on our Computer Misuse Act. So our legislation, as much as, and we'll speak about it a little further as well, when we speak about people feeling very secure online, our Computer Misuse Act has a bit of history. In 2014, we started with our Computer Misuse Amendment Act. And that traversed into our present, and we went into probably, I think it was 2017, 2019, we changed it to our cybercrime legislation. And right now, because it failed within Parliament within those times, and I'll tell you why it failed. It failed because there was an issue with the media thinking that what was being proposed did not allow them to keep their sources of information confidential to them. So we had a bit of a discussion and consultations with them, and that caused our bill as well to be a 3/5 majority bill. And so that kept us back from being approved even in a joint select committee to going forward at all. So what we did is that we reformulated our computer misuse, our cybercrime bill into our Computer Misuse Amendment Act, and we're trying to skew it more towards what I will tell you, what the Budapest Convention resembles. And the idea, once we have buy-in from the powers that be, would be to create that bill into a simple majority to get an easy pass, so that we're now looking at protecting those who are online from the cyber crimes that can be committed. Of course, our data protection, electronic transaction, telecommunications, all tie in and touch and concern our forward movement legislatively for digitization. It's not on the screen, but I just want to highlight that government ministries have already partnered with the TTIFC. I think you also, Mr. Outridge, on. And those ministries that have already signed on would be the Ministry of Works and the Judiciary in particular, and also the Immigration Department. And they're going to sign on very quickly, because then you're going to find payments being made online, even through PayPal. I think someone was discussing PayPal. So you're going to find that we're integrating more ways to have e-money and e-cash moving around in a safe environment. Yeah? So we could move on. Do you guys see the paper in the back? I just want to highlight that, unfortunately, we are still 90% paper-based, and we're hoping that through the passive of our legislative framework, that we're able to have all that shredded paper dealt with, and we're more so interacting on e-platforms. All right, so our gaps and challenges. So again, we just have a few of them here, and I will touch on them briefly. So we have a lack of regional legislative harmonization. Most of our old legislation we found did not touch and concern what other countries within our region have. And so right now, we're having those discussions to make sure that we have less of a gap when it comes to legislation. Then we can speak to partial proclamation. Let me just go back. It's moving faster than me. IT, can you assist? I'll talk about it by the meantime. So partial proclamation. So a lot of our legislation right now, because we deal with it in a miscellaneous provision bill, we find that parts of it can be proclaimed, parts of it cannot. Standalone bills are assented to, But upon proclamation, we could only do that in a piecemeal format, and that tends to happen sometimes because of a lack of human capacity and sometimes the financial resources. I'm not even touching it, and it's moving. So IT has to go back for me. So basically, with those proclamations, what we want to do is to shorten the gap that we take. Shorten that gap that we take to proclaim our legislation. Then we have some outdated legislation, so we're dealing with that, and that may happen because of our evolving digital space. Our lack of coordination. Someone spoke today about silos. A lot of that happens in Trinidad and Tobago as well. Our ministries sometimes are not coordinated with each other, and there itself is a challenge. And then there's the lack of legal capacity and more so limited digital literacy. So a new age, and sometimes you find that the language that we speak is a little different. So the digital literacy isn't there as yet. All right. Okay, great. So our recommendations and the best way ahead as we would see it. So again, we spoke about the harmonization, and we want to foster that collaboration between our drafters of policy and our drafters of law within the region. That conversation is something we want to encourage. We want to encourage increased funding. So did you find that's why we're here to you? But we also have other partners that they're able to assist. So even when we're on the platforms globally with meetings, we're talking to the UN, we're talking to Commonwealth, we're talking to CARICOM on a whole to find out where else we can get proper funding from, and funding also to increase that training of technocrats, to increase technology neutral legislation. And sometimes we might just need a little training in that as well to know what language we're speaking. And then, of course, cross-sector collaboration, which will help deal with the silos. Of course, we can embrace digital technology like we're doing right now. And I think what's very, very important is the sensitization and education to help build that trust factor as well. And we'll do that properly through public awareness. But like my permanent secretary said, that last point about communication strategy and having that sensitizing of member states and public of national ICT plans, it's very important, because you don't want to be disheveled and all over the place when you have a plan and nobody knows what that plan is. So again, it prevents us from working in silos. And this is my last slide. But I think it's very important. I just want to point out two of them in particular. That once-only legislation to enhance user experience and security is something that I think I heard the last speaker speak about it. And that's something that we're moving towards, something called a unique identifier or a unique identification number. And so back home by us, we have our ID number, we have our passport number, we have our number on our birth certificate, we have a number for our license. You understand? So that once only legislation is really to make us have one number that when it's pulled up on a system, we can get all the information on that individual. So that's very, very important to us, and legislatively, accelerating our legislative reform will help us get there. Also, our cloud policy, a lot of people are talking about the cloud, and I would mention that there's an issue on jurisdiction and sovereignty when we speak about cloud policy. So that's a whole other discussion that we might need more financing for. But it's very important to us that we understand that it balances data security with data openness. And our increased infrastructure and access to telecom services, it's something also very close to our TAT and Trinidad and Tobago on a whole. Lastly, continued tax relief on computer devices and continued internet access in schools. That's something that is happening now, but we think the recommendation on it is to please let it continue to happen. All right. So I think that I could wrap up and just say thank you very much for your kind attention. And of course, if you need any more information, our very worthy Permanent Secretary, Ms. Natasha Barrow, can assist. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trinidad and Tobago. Full points for graphics. So if you fall short in any other area, you've made it up there. I'm going to start with Sophie.
Thank you very much, Rodney. Great switch between the judges, right? So congratulations, excellent presentation. I really thought you addressed very many points. There were a number of issues that were really key, one of which speaks to my heart a lot. It's the cross-sectoral collaboration. So that is really important. We all recognize that digital is cross-cutting, so that cross-sectoral collaboration is key. Two questions. One, have you thought of measures to really, because my thing is sustainability, right? Yeah. So cross-sectoral collaboration, it depends on the people, it depends on the champions, but you also need the mechanisms in place so that it remains sustainable, so that when people come and go, you have that in place. And then secondly, I like the school connectivity, all the access, but I think like with the last presentation as well, it's really about not just the access, but the use and the adoption. So really think of that inclusiveness of the digital skills, basic and advanced digital skills, so people can actually use the ICT to get a better life, yes. So that you really become a digital nation. So it's question common, but welcome to answer.
Okay, so I'll take that last comment first, and hopefully I remember the first comment when I have to talk about it. So that question on the accessibility for schools and making sure that that it is something that is sustainable. Just last night, the Permanent Secretary was talking about that and talking to TAT to see if there can be partnerships within the schools where at least, just to start off, we have at least one subject being taught online. Because I mean, for us in the Caribbean, it could be a little expensive with the service providers in particular that we have at home, probably looking at how much bandwidth they may be using within our nation's schools. But at least if we can start off with, I think one of your deputy SGs was speaking of the low hanging fruit, the small wins, or I think it was Chris. And so that would be a low-hanging fruit for us to possibly have one, at least one in our primary and secondary schools, one class being taught online. So that's something that will help with sustainability. And I think your first question / comment spoke towards more or less the passing of the baton to make sure it is sustainable still with our cross-sector. I think that is possibly why the Honorable Dr. Rowley put forward a ministry to deal with digitization, because it's very heavy. It can be easy, but yet very complicated, because a lot of people have to be having conversations. Because right now, Ministry of Digital Transformation, together with TAT, together with, well, the Attorney General's office, of course, we're working in collaboration. And so that collaboration has to be handled hand in hand with each other. So I think with the formation of the ministry, that helps us. Thank you.
Madam.
So
this is my fare.
This is your fare?
Yes.
Sorry, Nivea, just
go ahead.
I just wanted to add another comment on the digital skills. Sure. And I think it's a very key initiative for us. And we want to continue with our digital education programs that we are currently undertaking, programs especially geared towards specific population groups, the elderly, persons with disabilities, the very young, and so on. And we want to continue with those type of educational programs. Sometimes we do it twice, 3 times for the year. We want to continue. Probably have even more programs with our national libraries, through these schools, the Ministry of Education, and so on. So that's a very key initiative in building
Yes.
skills.
Thank you very much. Yes, that's true. Yeah.
All right, TNT. Number one, you talked a lot about a very small portion of your public sector. So from trade and trade facilitation.
Yes.
What is Trinidad doing with the ASICUDA or any movement for digitalization of customs and security of international and intra-regional trade? Big issue for trade facilitation, because I am the Assistant Secretary General of a digital company right now. The second thing is movement of nationals. How are we compliant with movement of national skills? Same question I asked Antigua and Barbuda, and I know I'm asking because I already know the answer, but how are we moving internally, seeing that I have AG here, to ensure movement of national skills with people coming from other islands with particular skills? And I know you said you have to defer to other members of your chambers, compliance with international treaties, CARIFORUM, EPA. We've fallen short since I was attacked, which is many years ago. Authorization, reciprocity, comparability with what's happening in the EU for authorization of ICT sector, of electronic commerce. UK CARIFORUM, which is about to be tied up. We're going into second tranche EU EPA negotiations. Trinidad and Tobago is the hub for lower region. We've fallen short. Computer devices, tax relief. Tax relief on computer devices. We had lots of presentations earlier on the fact that computer devices are no longer, my Wi-Fi doesn't need a computer device at home. It just needs the smart box. Cable TV is just a little smart box now. You don't actually have to have, well, you certainly shouldn't have copper in your countries, but you no longer have to have fiber optic. So why the fixation on just devices? Why not expanding a little more? And you can't answer it, and I know that. Intra-regional and international trade, ease of business. Trinidad and Tobago is not where it should be on the WEF reports.
Okay.
So you can't say that you are the hub of business in the region. Look at WEF, look at our competitiveness, look at our ease of business, and we've got to pick it up, all right? And there's another AG in the room there, so I know he's recording notes to go back to the OECS and make sure the next time he see me, he don't get buff.
All right, so I'll take them as questions as opposed to a pull-up. So I will address what I can, because you know what they say, you stay silent unless you open your mouth and prove yourself to be, So, so I will answer what I can. What I can tell you with regards to the tax, that first came about for two reasons. One, students needed laptops in school. We were on that drive at a point in time, and especially with COVID, a lot of classes were online, and the Ministry of Finance, through BIR, I think it was, saw it very fit to lessen or take off some taxes. So that the fixation came about because of that consciousness. So that now it can be developed to encourage taxes of certain, I don't want to call it infrastructure because I was pulled up on that word earlier, but the taxes that could be lessened on other services is something that we could look at. And I think that that is where even our passage of legislation could help us, because our definition of computer and our definition of computer device is so very stoic, it's so very limited that it doesn't allow us, if they say on computer devices and we look at what the legislation is, it could do with some widening. So I take that as a point home as well. With regards to trade and us being a hub, I think I'm going to have to leave that for trade. And I think I'm going to have to tell them about it. With regards to the AG's office, I think you were asking with our agreements. Yeah, again, that is the SG's department, and I don't want to speak wrongly on their behalf because I do understand we have an online. Yes, so that is something that as well I would have to take back home, raise with them and probably see, because I mean, all the legislation and all those agreements pass through the Attorney General's office. So it will be something that I will definitely have to flag through the PS to pass on to the Attorney General, but I will pass to PS now on something, yeah.
Okay, very quickly, because we have still two more comments and Barbados before lunch.
Very, very, very quickly. Just to, because I'm listening to the questions and you're trying to put Solange under some fire there.
Yes.
But with regard to all the ICT equipment and the taxes and that kind of thing, it has a lot to do with the fact that, Trinidad realized that it was not where it was supposed to be, technology-wise, when COVID happened. Right, so in order to try to bring everybody at the same time up to a certain standard and quickly, I think we felt that one of the best ways to do it would have been through eliminating that whole burden of taxes on that kind of electronic equipment. As it pertains to the different treaties that we have, we do have an MOU with Estonia, as we would have mentioned before. And we also do have a digital economy partnership agreement, but that is with Chile, New Zealand, and Singapore at the moment, right? So we are heading in that direction. I mean, I agree that we may not be there yet, but we have been making a lot of strides in that direction.
Thank you. Chris?
Yes.
Just very quickly, just in the interest of time, I'll just keep mine short to a couple of comments, really. First of all, you talked about, first of all, great presentation, and I really like the focus on open data systems.
Yes.
Technology neutrality. For business, that's absolutely essential. And I also really like that point around collaboration around legal drafting. There's absolutely no reason why we should be all doing this on our own. When we can be collaborative, particularly around trade legislation. So my two comments quickly. One around citizen digital identities. Don't confuse that with legal entity identifiers for business in trade. Two completely different things. The LEI system for trade, again, is in that standards toolkit. It's the GLIFE system, globally recognized by G20 governments and regulators. So it's already there. It's cheap, 30 euros a year for businesses. It's not expensive at all. So don't forget that. That's super important. And then really a comment for all the presentations, really, don't forget that UNCITRAL Melita framework. If we don't get that in place, this trade transformation is not going to happen. We know that from experience everywhere in the world. It's the one thing that's holding up that transformation for the whole ecosystem. It's so, so important. So please don't forget that. And don't also forget that roadmap that I put up yesterday. That Melita framework is where goods and finance come together in an integrated environment. That's why we need that legislation. There's mention of payments, paperless, totally get it. Customs has been mentioned. But that Melita framework is the hinge point. We've got to get that in place. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. I'll take that home as well. Yes?
Thank you. And just final comment before we close. And this is not a problem that's unique to Trinidad and Tobago, but I know at one stage Trinidad was pretty advanced in its digital transformation agenda. I think that's where TT Connect and so on, the government portal, which unfortunately is not available the last couple of months.
We have TT Biz as well. We have iGov TT.
Yes.
We have some, no worries.
Of course you do, of course you do. And then unfortunately also in COVID, many of our countries set up online ED forms to enter the country, and unfortunately many have reverted back to the paper-based system. So it's really, how do we find the continuity between political administration so that, if it's a strategy or policy that's working, that there's continuity, and even, like I said, coming out of these crises like COVID, that we maintain and we don't fall back into the comfort zone of the paper. So this is more of a comment, not necessarily a question. And on that note, I want to thank Team Trinidad and Tobago for its presentation.
Thank you.